It's confirmed. Pikmin 4 completely reboots the Pikmin timeline. Yeah, despite having a big 4 in the title, this game ignores the stories from the first 3 games in favor of hitting reset with a new story, locations, and a largely new cast of characters. But how do we know for sure it's a reboot? Well, it's the only thing that makes sense. Before we go further, we should warn you that there are significant story spoilers ahead, so we'd advise caution if you haven't gotten to the game's credits yet. So if you're ready, let's explain how Pikmin 4 is a reboot. From the very beginning, Olimar tells the story of how he crash landed on planet PNF 404 as if it's his first time discovering the place, and not, his fourth. He even talks about Pikmin as if he just discovered them. Now you might think he's recounting the events of Pikmin 1 until he talks about his pupper friend Moss, who definitely wasn't in that game. The intro also concludes with Olimar's final day of his journey, where he found the interstellar radio inside a giant house so he could contact the rescue corps for evac. If this doesn't sound like it happened in Pikmin 1, that's because it didn't happen in Pikmin 1. Eventually, Olimar turned into a leafling, which led many to theorize that Pikmin 4 took place in a split timeline of sorts, where it's set after the bad ending of Pikmin 1, in which Olimar's corpse gets thrown into an onion and spat back into the soil to grow. No doubt an interesting theory, but the entire beginning sequence disproves this by showcasing events that did not happen in Pikmin 1. What's more is that after rescuing Olimar in Pikmin 4, you unlock his playable story, Shipwreck Tale, which recounts the events leading up to his turning into a leafling. Admittedly, the beginning of this is a bit confusing, as Olimar says he'd have to enlist the help of Pikmin to repair his ship. But didn't he just land on this planet? How does he already know what Pikmin are? Well, this makes more sense if we look back at the intro, where his ship, the SS Dolphin, crash lands into the ground, and where he discovers an onion buried in the dirt that spawns Pikmin, who carry a ship piece back to the Dolphin. So cutting back to his shipwreck tale, the onion is already in place and the ship looks somewhat better, meaning this is set very shortly after the game's intro. Along the way, Olimar discovers the yellow and blue Pikmin, and he acts as if he's never seen them before. So again, there's no way 4 is set after the events of Pikmin 1 through 3. Even more interesting is that Olimar's Shipwreck Tale is essentially a reimagining of Pikmin 1, with the same objective of collecting 30 ship parts before your air supply runs dry. Only the time limit has been halved, from 30 days to 15. What's even more interesting is that the story ends almost like the bad ending of 1, where Olimar's body is carried into the onion by Pikmin, only this time it turns him into a leafling instead of burying him into the ground. This happens whether or not he collects all the ship parts. This adds credence to the theory that this could have been a split timeline from Pikmin 1 if Nintendo wanted it to be, but alas, they changed so much that it's incompatible as anything but a reboot. Or maybe a multiverse or something. Even then, some story elements from the original trilogy sneak their way into Pikmin 4, such as Louis, who is still as scummy as ever. Because the events of 2 and 3 didn't happen, Olimar simply describes Louis as his co-worker from Hokotade Freight. Also, the Copites from Pikmin 3 are here, though they are original characters and not Alf, Brittany, or Charlie. They even describe the planet Copi as having a booming population struggling with resources, which is exactly why they went to PNF 404 to gather more. Speaking of, the planet didn't even have that name until Pikmin 3, which is another element that was carried over into 4. So it seems that while Nintendo retconned the events of the first 3 Pikmin games, they kept the lore completely intact. It makes us wonder why they wanted to make Pikmin 4 a complete reboot of the series. Perhaps because it's been so long since Pikmin 3 that most people didn't remember it anyway? Well, that might have made sense if they didn't re-release the entire trilogy on Switch, where people could get caught up on the story before 4. There was even a cliffhanger of sorts in Pikmin 3's best ending, hinting that the accident which caused the team to crash land on the planet wasn't an accident after all. What caused Nintendo to completely ignore this and decide to start fresh? While we may never know for sure, it could be because they wanted to give the Pikmin series a radical shift, as the series hasn't been one of Nintendo's financially successful franchises. Heck, remember in 2015 when Miyamoto said Pikmin 4 was almost finished? Clearly that wasn't the case. Perhaps they decided late into development that it was time to give Pikmin a significant shakeup that would appeal to both newcomers and veterans alike, adding more accessible features like lock-on and time rewind. And during this period of reinvention, they also probably thought that rebooting the story would be less intimidating for series newcomers. That doesn't explain the giant 4 on the title, but I digress. So in case you had any doubt that Pikmin 4's story was a reboot, doubt no longer, as it's clear from the very beginning that it is. Just the fact that Olimar lands on PNF 404 and discovers Pikmin for the first time is evidence enough. Though it's comforting to see characters and lore from the original trilogy return, so it still feels very familiar in this regard. Hopefully future entries will see the return of other elements as well, like my pals Alf, Brittany, and Charlie. I hope they're doing well. The question now is, where does a theoretical Pikmin 5 go from here? Will it be a continuation of 4's story? Or could they possibly get away with returning to where 3 left off and finally resolve that decade-plus-old cliffhanger? Well, the only way we can see that happening is if the Pikmin multiverse is a real thing. That way we could get at least 2 Olimars in the same room. One might think this is too far-fetched, but in space, anything can happen. Maybe the rescue corps could get sucked into a wormhole and run into the squad from Pikmin 3? It would certainly make for an interesting adventure into the Pikmin-verse. But let me know what you think. Are you disappointed that Pikmin 4 retcons the first 3 games? Or are you completely fine with this new timeline? Would you also want to see a Pikmin multiverse? Sound off in the comments, and until next time, bye.